Hey, hello. Another edition of Crypto Chat. We've been bringing this out on a weekly basis. And for those who've been either watching it live or coming back and seeing the recordings, hopefully enjoying all the interesting content. We've got a different sets of guests over a period of time. Some traders, some builders, some people who build communities. And so I think we're just trying to keep that eclectic mix to make sure that you get multiple perspectives. Just a healthy reminder, everything that we do here is geared towards educational content. The idea is to provide a lot of good content so you can make your own decisions, right? And you can be more well informed. But absolutely nothing that we say now, this show, any other show, is investment advice. There's zero investment advice, zero tax advice. So don't listen to us for any of that. What you could take away, though, is a lot of good content, and enjoy the conversation that we're having with the guests. One more piece I want to mention before we jump in and, of course, get along with the show today is that this is an interactive show. We encourage our listeners to ask questions. If you've tuned in live, do ask us questions. We are live, and which means you could ask us questions via Twitter, on YouTube, wherever you see appropriate. Jump in, ask your questions. We pick them up on time. We'll put it right to our guest right away, live, and we'll have the guest answer the questions. And if not, we'll certainly try and follow up. So with that said, I think enough of talking from my side. Let's jump in with the good stuff. Hey, Paul.
Hey, how's it going, Shanky?
Doing well. How are you doing today?
Yeah, no, pretty good. Obviously, a lot of excitement. Twitter is just absolutely blowing up. Everyone's excited about Ethereum's new all-time highs, and no doubt that impacts on a lot of all the projects and the whole ecosystem, right? Everybody gets out there and shares in that success. So
totally.
Cool.
Totally. The conversation is moving from ETH is serious to ETH is going to flip BTC. So let's see how it unfolds.
We've heard that before, and
right.
I'm sure we'll hear it many times if it does happen. So it's good fun.
Fantastic. Okay, who do we have today? Who's our guest? Let's get to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, as always, we're trying to bring you some of the most interesting people in crypto. And today we're talking with Arthur Falls, who himself was a podcast host right back in 2014 with Beyond Bitcoin. And he's done a number of really interesting kind of community building and influencer type things since then. And I'm pretty excited. He's got a lot of stories. And like me, based in New Zealand, so we do get to hang out for a few beers, and we might hear some of those stories on today's show.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
All right, let's bring him in. Hey, Arthur.
How's it going?
Hey there.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Oh, you're very welcome. I mean, it's obviously been quite a journey for you since 2014, and that personal journey, first finding crypto. How did it start? And what's kind of evolved for you since those early days?
I think, like lots of people, right? Like, I read that Bitcoin white paper, and it was a revelatory moment. So you hear about people talking about great paintings or really beautiful classical music, but to me, it's all just blotches on canvas and a bunch of strings, But then when I actually read the Bitcoin white paper, I had that feeling of experiencing a profound work of genius, that experience of the sublime, as Wordsworth would call it. And yeah, that was what got me hooked. That was in 2013. And I was trying to get involved, trying to find a way to get involved. And I decided in 2014 that the only way I was going to get the information I wanted and be able to actually, participate in what I could see was a technological revolution was to make a podcast. And I wasn't particularly interested in Bitcoin. That seemed to me to be something that had played out.
Sure.
It didn't seem like there was much more to do with Bitcoin. It was never going to scale, so they were always going to have to come up with second layer solutions, which themselves are interesting, but we're just talking about currency. Surely there's more we can do. And so I started a podcast Beyond Bitcoin and started pursuing interviews with people who could tell me about that.
Very cool.
Back at that time, there weren't many other crypto podcasts, and definitely, none of the professionals had kind of moved in. You're very much kind of pioneering that. How easy was it to kind of get started and build that first audience?
Great question. Adam Levine of Let's Talk Bitcoin. He's often forgotten as a significant figure in the entire crypto the story of blockchain. But he was a fundamental individual. Not only did he develop a lot of early technologies and use cases around NFTs, community tokens, he actually came up with a lot of that stuff. He also created the first major kind of crypto podcast, Let's Talk Bitcoin, that featured, among other excellent regular hosts, Andreas Antonopoulos. And that was kind of what made Andreas Antonopoulos famous, just through his oratory on Adam Levine's podcast. And so Adam Levine had the whole thing set up. He wanted to get other people podcasting, and he invited a whole bunch of people to submit podcasts, and I submitted along with them. And I think I went from self-publishing 150 listens a week to like 10,000 listens immediately just by publishing through his feed. And so it was easy, but it was easy anyway. And 150 listens is great for starting out. It was certainly enough to keep me going. But what really supercharged the whole effort was Adam Levine's platform.
Wow, interesting. Did I hear the number right? 150 different, that's a lot of content. So
listeners.
Okay. Even that is plenty. That's good too, and especially in those times, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And how often were you churning out these podcasts or the podcast episodes?
I tried to
like weekly?
Yeah, I tried to do it weekly, but sometimes you just don't really have content for a week, on a weekly basis. Also, you get burnout as well. And so, I'd take, hiatuses here and there. I think I made 27 episodes or 28 episodes for Beyond Bitcoin and then kind of put it to bed for a while.
Right. Yeah. It takes a lot of work for sure. Now, the Beyond Bitcoin story, from what we understand, was barely the beginning. Like you started out with it, podcasting became your thing, you started contributing, started learning, you started becoming part of that ecosystem. But then I believe eventually you jumped in with both feet, if you may, into that ecosystem, became part of consensus, and perhaps saw a lot more things more closely, especially in the sort of call it Beyond Bitcoin world. Right. So how did that happen? How was that journey like, that part of the
it was journey, intense. It was really intense. What happened was Ethereum had launched. Basically, I'd played out in Beyond Bitcoin. I'd covered what was happening in 2014, which is really interesting. We should talk about it. But I'd covered it all, and it had happened. It had moved into a period of stasis where nothing was really moving forward. And so I stopped Beyond Bitcoin, and then Ethereum launched, and it was like, well, Ethereum has answers to a lot of the questions that I originally asked in Beyond Bitcoin and either couldn't find answers to or found different answers to. And so I started making, I was actually in the United States at the time. I was on an island off the coast of Maine with 60 people. This thing was tiny. I was lobster fishing, and I'd go, the only place you could get a good internet connection was in the neighborhood house, which is kind of like a town hall for a town of 60 people. Right. And I'd go in there, it would be freezing cold. And you can hear on those early episodes that I'm in a hall just with my microphone set up, all bundled up, interviewing people. And so I started the Ether Review. And I remember I saw on the Consensus website, they were looking for an office manager. And I messaged Joe Lubin, because I'd interviewed him a couple of times, and said, "Hey, Joe, look, I've never been in an office in my life, but I'm sure it can't be that hard to be an office manager. And I'm making this podcast, and if you paid me generously, I'm sure I could afford to live in New York or make the podcast, do your office management and stuff. Seems like it would be a good thing for both of us." And he's just like, "Do you think you'd be capable and competent of running an online media outlet?" And I just replied, "Absolutely, mate."
That's a great Kiwi attitude.
Yeah,
excellent.
Well, of course,
what a story.
Myself in the deep end.
What a story. Okay, so you ended up running the media and a lot of stuff for Consensus early on then.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did my best. I wound up over there anyway and did the whole Consensus thing. It was the place, Consensus at the time was an absolute shambles. I remember being horrified when I arrived because they had all this branding and stuff. But when I got there, I realized like the emperor wasn't wearing any clothes. Like there was nothing here. Like it was astounding and horrifying, especially after I was used to what was going on in 2014, which was real hard out innovation, like people trying and failing and producing products that like barely sort of worked and everyone learning from it. And it was really intense and the work ethic was great. And there was a lot of hard workers at Consensus doing great stuff, but the way it was being presented to the world was disingenuous initially. And which is probably a controversial thing to say about, but that's the truth anyway. And I mean, obviously history
gone by. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I was there and they scaled up, they scaled to like, how many? Well, I was there 260. I think I was employee 68. And I was there for 18 months and left as employee, when they'd hired over 200, there were over 250 people at the time I'd left. And during that time, I traveled around the world, interviewed a lot of people about, it was crazy, like you could just do anything. Like I just flew literally around the world to just every Consensus office, anywhere that seemed interesting. Cause I don't know, I had no mandate. It's like, I wasn't really sure what my job was. So I was like, well, I mean, I may as well just ride this thing to the end. And so, I just started flying around and just expensing flights and accommodation. It was cheap. Like, I wasn't abusing it, but I also don't know what, I wasn't operating under any directive. And I just interviewed everyone I could and tried to make a documentary or something about the Ethereum ecosystem. That was in 2017. And honestly, I just couldn't come up with anything. I couldn't see anything that was really happening. There's all the talk, but underneath it all, I just did not see any meaningful technology being produced, or at least being productized, or even moving toward productization. And it was incredibly disillusioning.
And if I think back to 2017 myself, it was just all white papers and flashy websites, right? And everybody, every man and his dog, we could say, was doing an ICO and just kind of flooding in with money. How much has actually changed since those 2017 ICO white paper days in what you're seeing from the ecosystem? Have we matured to doing the serious building?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it happened in 2018. with Uniswap and liquidity mining. Those were the missing pieces of the puzzle. So, the idea of crypto has always been DeFi, right? And at the end of the day, it's certainly in its current instantiation, because transactions, or let's call them state transactions, are so expensive that the only way you can justify using them is if what you're doing has high monetary value. And so in its current state, blockchain has to be financial and almost exclusively, and public blockchains. And so by coming up with the automated market maker that Vitalik Buterin did, and then I can't remember who came up with liquidity mining. Sorry?
Yeah, so I mean, there's also, Hayden Adams, and then liquidity mining kind of evolved out of a few different projects around that time. But yeah, definitely providing that liquidity into pools suddenly became a thing. And I remember, in fact, you were at the conference here in Auckland in 2017, where one of the Bancor guys was first talking about, that kind of algorithmically rebalancing kind of token pool. But it really is now that innovation that drives so much of what's going on. It's great to see.
It's what we needed. It's not that there wasn't awesome stuff being built before. It wasn't viable product. A lot of it was bullshit, but pardon my French. There wasn't a lot of there was very little viable product, if any at all. And we're still sort of in that position because Ethereum's too expensive to be useful for just about anything. We're still in a purely, I'll say it's hyperbole, but it serves to illustrate the point. Purely speculative industry that isn't really creating anything for anyone outside of crypto. That's beginning to change with some of these new platforms that are higher performing. Cardano, Hashgraph, Filecoin is a really good example of one that's doing something. Helium, actually, although that's not a general purpose blockchain, but it is an awesome business that uses blockchain incredibly effectively. Polkadot, Dfinity's coming out. I'll wax lyrical about Dfinity, you know me. And so we're actually seeing not only the software that can enable us to do what we always wanted to do with decentralized finance, but we're also getting platforms that can run that software sufficiently inexpensively and with high enough performance at great enough scale to solve all age-old problems that we always used to talk about, like financial inclusion, that it turned out that we just failed to actually deliver on. That was one of the big ideas about Bitcoin and the crypto space in general, and it's been an abject failure as a project. But now we're starting to get to the point where we have both the products and the hosting environments to run them on.
Yeah, completely. In fact, you make a couple of different points that I want to double click on a little bit. One, of course, the fact that Bitcoin's original promise was peer-to-peer, easy, fast transactions, and sort of totally pivoted towards store of value. Everything became super expensive. ETH kind of came to solve that problem, and then that has now started becoming expensive to a level. So DeFi hopefully is addressing that, at least in terms of providing the platforms. We'll see where it goes in future, and we'd love to sort of get your sense of what you think and where that's headed. But also, I think a point that you mentioned in passing was projects like Filecoin, Dfinity, Helium, and I do understand that you even work closely with some of them, especially projects like Dfinity. So instead of just talking about the specific project, so to speak, I think would love to get your viewpoints, just having worked with them, of how viable is that? Because all these ETH challengers or new platforms, what do you think might just click? What might be areas that we still need to kind of see emerge, if you may, because still the unknowns. Would love to kind of get your picture on both of these, the emergence of DeFi and call them challengers or alt chains, like both of them. Where do you think the story is headed? What are you seeing? What's your sort of sense on those, if you may?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So, I mean, I've always been of the opinion that this is I say always, I've changed my opinion sometimes, but I do tend to come back to the idea that this is a market for, let's call it secure computation, right? I mean, that's not the word that we'd use, but it's whatever you do with Ethereum, it's whatever you do with Bitcoin. You're doing some kind of computation that you know is going to execute exactly the way you want it to. And that itself can be seen as a commodity. And as we know, Ethereum is a source of a general purpose form of this type of compute is incredibly expensive and limited. It's incredibly expensive and limited in supply. So this is where it follows that there is a market for other participants in to provide this type of secure compute. And they're not perfectly fungible, but just imagining they are. You then have a question of, is a Challenger's secure compute equal to Ethereum's, given that there's composability issues between the chains, different, like it's a different development environment. So developers have to learn different skills. So the workforce isn't perfectly mobile between these two different, to exploit these two different sources of the secure compute commodity. But because people see this as an issue, they stepped in with these like multi-chain solutions. Polkadot is a classic example of a recognition of this problem.
Right.
So, and so this is kind of where this is a logical evolution of a market for a scarce resource when you have different groups or different, let's call them entrepreneurs, capable of serving that market with a comparable product. Now, I mean, they're not the same though. And the reasons why people trust Ethereum and are prepared to rely on it are quite strange. This is highly speculative. A lot of it is, because you don't have perfect composability, that limits you in terms of the volume of your, the like capital pool that you've actually got to work with to bring value to that that source of secure computation. So I don't believe in the multi-chain future. I believe in that this is a natural monopoly, because I think you need perfect fungibility. You need perfect composability of applications on these platforms. And if you have a watershed or a gap or a membrane through which they have to communicate, one side is going to be favored over the other. And if there's sufficient supply on the favored side, then all others will wither away and die. And for this reason, this is controversial, but it's a point that needs to be made. I believe that the team that can produce a source of this secure computation commodity that is easy to use and that provides sufficient composability inside its walls, or and sufficient volume, or a sufficient supply to serve the entire market, will just take the entire market, and everything else will just fade into irrelevance. And I think the race is on to be that platform, to be that source of the secure computation commodity. So that's what I think's going on. I mean, I think Dfinity is the one I always have. And even though they haven't launched, it's just the team. Dominic Williams was the guy who came up with the beacon chain idea. That's at the heart of just about everything. Not Hedera Hashgraph. I'm not sure how Polkadot works. Definitely, it's at the heart of a very similar design to what he came up with. Is used to secure Filecoin, to secure Ethereum,
Right.
or Ethereum 2.0, which itself has composability issues, from what I understand. So that's the platform side of it, and that is a controversial perspective, but it is what I think. As far as DeFi,
Yeah.
do we want to unpack a little bit there before?
Well, I do want to unpack a little bit, because it seems like the hegemony has moved from Ethereum to the EVM, right? And so we are seeing these other chains trying to leverage the developer community around Solidity and the EVM to essentially bootstrap and say, hey, yeah, we do have a larger supply of secure computation, or at least a network that's less congested. And do you think that will continue? And I guess also it comes back to Dfinity. Are we going to see EVM-like applications being able to run on a network like Dfinity?
So it makes perfect sense that because if you're providing a solution that doesn't have the barrier of having to retrain, that allows a developer to kind of, let's call it, workforce fungibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a huge advantage. But people just say the EVM's bad to develop on. People I've talked to, and they wouldn't have, having talked to a few people at the foundation, they say at the Ethereum Foundation, I've heard on multiple occasions it said that they would have used the WebAssembly virtual machine if it had existed at the time.
Awesome stuff. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so lots of other teams have opted for the WebAssembly virtual machine. But at the same, again, even though they might do that, it's not the WebAssembly runtime environments across different blockchains and their platforms are never going to be identical, because you just have different underlying stuff going on, right? The WebAssembly virtual machine can be the way you make stuff happen, but it's going to have different performance bottlenecks in different areas and going to have to be developed for in a very different way in every different runtime environment and every different blockchain platform. As far as the EVM, I think it probably just runs, what do I know? But the sense I get is that it just runs really badly in all environments, and so it's the same. So you don't have to relearn how to develop for it.
Yeah, it's a good point. There is movement towards WASM and the whole WebAssembly for sure. And perhaps I think what we'll also see is separation of developer tooling and runtime, right? So we'll start seeing perhaps EVM take on a bigger role, like the runtime, if you may, right? And more blockchains supporting EVM, because there is, of course, the desire to the fungibility of developers, as you said, right? Or the fungibility of skills, which I think is a big point. You don't want to have yet another learning curve, yet another sort of new set of tools. But of course, there'll be improvements in terms of the programming constructs and programming language and tooling. So yeah, it's fun to see. Let's see how that evolves.
Yeah. The thing as well, though, right, is there's not that many blockchain builders out there compared to the total number of developers in the world. And I think of, say, let's take, for example, the software industry in India, right? I went to India on behalf of Dfinity in 2018 was it 2018? Yeah. To see what was going on over there and try and engage the developer community over there. And it was amazing. Like, I found myself standing up and giving lectures, and which is a laughable proposition, in front of some of the best schools in India. It's like these people all have IQs of over 200. This is the smartest of the smart. And they were really, really excited. And the number of developers in India is doubling or increasing by about 50%, I think, every year. And none of them are learning to EVM, The actual software industry is huge, and blockchain is so small. And this, one point, just the fact that Ethereum is the standard now does not mean it will be in the future, especially considering its incredible limitations that exist right now. And so I do think it's open for other stuff to get in. And again, I also feel like it's it was like the EVM was deprecated on release, right? Like there was always the WebAssembly virtual machine. That is the runtime for the world. It's been decided by the Linux Foundation and Google and Apple and everyone. And I just feel like anything, again, right? There's a bit of a monopoly, a natural monopoly here. Mm-hmm. Anything that's not WebAssembly is kind of destined to be deprecated in favor of.
Right. No, you make a good point there. In fact, I would agree with you that the developer community globally is very large. It's humongous, right? So if you look at North America, if you look at, like you mentioned, India, China, I'm sure even down there in New Zealand or, Europe, the developer community has just been seeing a lot of healthy growth because also, it's fun, the millennials are very tech savvy, and plus it provides great careers. So there's a lot more people entering the sort of, the developer workforce, right, globally. But out of that, if you look at how many people know blockchain technologies at large and how many people specialize in EVM, that's like a minuscule, small rounding off error, right? It's too small really when you start looking at global numbers. I think you make a great point. Now, of course, if sitting from inside the crypto world, it seems like, yeah, it's huge, it's big, because yes, it's a big chunk of that small universe. But you're right, you make a very interesting point that in the larger scheme of things, it's still tiny, right? So as the ecosystem grows, whatever is the global standard, right? Whether it's the WASM type of standard, the WebAssembly, or whether it's Python developers using, Python runtimes, or whatever else that is like the global standard, I think eventually it's got to converge and mix with it, because that's where all the traction is. That's where the world is moving, right? So, yeah, great point. I like that school of thought. That's very interesting.
Well, that's kind of like the workforce fungibility again, right? Like you've got,
right.
If you want to, the global developer workforce or software engineer workforce is not compatible without some degree of retraining with Ethereum. So, and then again, there's also not enough EVM compute to support onboarding that a large number of people. But if someone can come up with a big supply, of this, I'm focusing on this term commodity because I believe that these platforms do produce a commodity, and that is the type of compute, blockchain compute, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And so if someone else can produce a sufficiently large volume of that commodity, and also come up with a product that people actually want to use outside crypto land, then they've onboard those people.
And I mean, there's been some other really smart research-driven projects, like Tezos is probably a good example, where they did have a better model for supplying that compute, but it was still only really targeted at crypto or financial type applications, and therefore they couldn't break out of the inertia that was already there around Ethereum. What excites you most about Dfinity, and do you think they have a sufficiently differentiatable kind of product to build its own momentum there after it launches?
Absolutely, I do. As far as what I find exciting about Dfinity, it makes sense to go back to the founding of Ethereum and the vision of Web3, right? Which was an Ethereum idea. It was probably a Gavin Wood idea that got bolted onto Ethereum, but I don't know. There were originally three parts to the Ethereum ecosystem. Ethereum, which was the secure compute, it was the
world computer.
Record keeping layer, execution, da-di-da-di-da. Then you had the second one was Swarm, which was the decentralized storage layer. And the third was Whisper, which was a secure communication layer. Whisper and Swarm never really worked. I mean, Ethereum itself never really worked, but never managed to get to the scale required for that Web3 vision. Whisper, incidentally, I think was deprecated immediately, or just dropped immediately, because it was this vestigial thing left over from Wei Dai's B-Money paper, I think. The idea you needed a secure communication protocol and I think it was erroneously included in that vision. So Swarm went on to be this decentralized storage layer, but it never succeeded itself. And the platform that wound up taking its place very successfully was Filecoin. And so, when you talk about like these, Dfinity as a source of this versus say Ethereum, you need to have both the execution and the storage. And the idea right now is you need to configure Filecoin and configure whatever your other application is running on, and the two run in tandem. And that is the design. That's the design pattern that is favored by current platforms. The idea of Dfinity, and this was Dom's, to quote Dom, this game will be won by product. And he always was had the opinion that whatever was produced by Dfinity, it had to be easier to use than every other form of web or software hosting. That was one of the core design principles. So not only does it have to be cheap and fast and, kind of comparable to what people currently use for the web, but it also has to incorporate storage, scaling, and all of that in an easier package than traditional hosting or anything available in blockchain. That was the design. Those were always the design goals. I'm pretty sure they've done it, and if they have, this is the source of. This is going to be the source of this huge influx of the secure compute commodity that we're talking about. Like, they hired Andreas Rosberg, who was let's just call him the chief architect. I forget what his actual title was of the WebAssembly standard. Kind of thought of it has been referred to as his magnum opus, but then other people have referred to Motoko, which is the language he developed for Dfinity, as his magnum opus. So, I mean, any way you cut it, it looks pretty good as far as developer friendliness. And then their mode of scaling was always based on, the state-of-the-art consensus, which Dom came up with in 2016. It was called threshold relay and probabilistic slot consensus. We can unpack that, but we'll be here all day. But he had this idea and he took it around, and it worked. I remember hearing about it. It was like, wow, that's it. You've just solved it. It was like that feeling of reading the Bitcoin white paper again. And he went to the Ethereum Foundation and sat down with Vitalik and tried to tell everyone that this is what they should be doing. And he just got rubbished. And that's why we have Dfinity, is because no one would just adopt this awesome technology he'd come up with. And then they subsequently went and adopted it anyway. Not in exactly his formulation, almost always in inferior formulations. I think of Filecoin, which actually uses a permission validator system, but then also an almost identical version of Dfinity's random beacon using threshold relay, which is bizarre to me. But yeah, so it looks like they've got it, and they've got the ability to scale. At least they've got the groundwork in place. I don't know how scalable they will be at the start. They don't have to replicate the data stored on their hardware in the network across the entire network. They can do it on subnets that range in size from, to pick a random number, because I do not know. Every time I talk to the foundation, it's something different. That would be under NDA anyway. But let's say it's between 8 and 128 nodes. They don't offer any greater replication than that because there's just no need for it. And then they've got uniform hardware. So instead of having something that'll run on anything, they just make sure everyone has uniform hardware, 100 gigabit connection or 10 gigabit connection, run it running the software in a data center, built-in governance, all these things, all these ideas that have planned for future needs and planned to provide this compute commodity at the scale and on the terms of, external software developers, not just blockchain people. So yeah, I mean, I think Dfinity's got it. And then you take, having never seen them live, but then you take Uniswap and the automated market maker system, the incentivization like liquidity mining, and you've got all of the pieces of the puzzle to actually produce, this open finance vision, to produce this Web3 vision, where you can decentralize the internet, you can decentralize the financial system. You can probably do it using, you can do a lot of the stuff using, say, I mean, I don't know, let's say Ethereum scaled and Filecoin, right? It's possible, but can we really imagine that taking over as the new web? It doesn't seem plausible to me. Whereas if you've got something that's just super easy to use and doesn't require an external storage layer, that does sound more plausible, especially at a time when just try and deploy. I mean, Dom goes on about this all the time. Try and deploy a scalable application to Amazon Web Services. It's expensive and hard work. And it takes multiple disciplines. If you can just build the scaling and everything into the hosting platform so that all you have to do is write the logic, then you've totally overturned the way that applications are fielded as part of business models. And yeah, I mean, he's done all the right thinking. They poached IBM's top head of cryptography, and then he handpicked a team to bring with him. And now there's like 180 people there. I mean, it's a juggernaut, just unlike the whole crypto world's ever seen.
Yeah. No, they have grown pretty rapidly, raised big amounts of money, and there's like a release coming out soon. And when I say soon, it's like this week, I believe. So we'll see the initial glimpse of it, I guess, going live. Yeah, fun stuff. Yeah, we could definitely agree with you on the fact that, the ecosystem will evolve. There'll be platforms like Dfinity, perhaps more, who knows, right, which will come into the forefront, and it'll look more like the web, if you may, or the true Web3 that, people have been talking about, haven't realized yet, right? Where we'll have open finance and a lot of other scalable apps there. Fantastic. Yeah, lots of the great vision, and we're all sort of rooting for it, if you may. Right? We want that to happen. So it's good stuff. Switching gears a little bit, you've been all very quiet. You started out, you were the early, voice of crypto, if you may, if I were to use that word, podcast and beyond Bitcoin and everything else. More lately, as the ecosystem has emerged, has become bigger, more podcasts, we don't see you there. What's your thought? Are you coming back with something new? Should we expect a newer podcast or a newer some sort of a community piece that is in the making? Tell us whatever you can.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's just we were in another state of hiatus, right? Nothing happened. Blockchain doesn't move fast. It moves really, really slowly. It's just really noisy. And I was burned out after working for Dfinity and working for Consensus. And so I just kind of hunkered down and just, licked my wounds and lived life and kind of rejuvenated myself. And as I watched, just, DeFi was kind of forming and stuff, but it was hard to really know that was what was significant. It was hard to, you see lots of great ideas. You know? And you've got to be so engaged to recognize what is transformative innovation. Turns out I was asleep at the wheel, and deservedly so, I think. And so I was just taking a break and trying to find a bit of inspiration, or waiting for inspiration to strike. And so now Dfinity's launching, right? Everything's kind of a bit different. I'm feeling pretty fresh. I've got a bit of pep, and I'd like to. I just recorded a podcast with a Dfinity person yesterday, and with someone developing on Dfinity yesterday. I'm recording right after this, literally in 15 minutes, another podcast episode with someone building in Dfinity. And I'd like to make a community DAO or even a couple to help support the ecosystem. Because I just think that's if you have a DAO, you can actually use a funding pool to direct your own vision. Whether that's correct or incorrect, it doesn't really matter as long as there's multiple visions being applied to the underlying platform at one time. So that's what I'm working on now. Yeah, you will see a lot more of me.
Perfect.
That's very cool to hear, Arthur. And yeah, definitely going to be good to have your voice on the air again. And yeah, that vision for a DAO, I mean, from what we can see from 2019, 2020 DeFi influencers, a lot of them were funded by Gitcoin donations. So yeah, it's definitely, I think, extending that and yeah, kind of embracing the broader ecosystem outside of Ethereum is going to be one to see.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, we have one fun thing towards the end of every episode, just a rapid fire set of questions for our guests. Are you game for it, Arthur?
Of course.
Excellent. All right. Question 1. If you had to pick one thing to trade, would it be NFTs, DeFi, or Bitcoin?
DeFi.
Nice. And in one sentence, what's similar between the 2017 and 2021 bull run?
I'd say what's most interesting is the difference. There's actual stuff going on that's valuable in 2021. There was valuable stuff then. So, but I mean, what's really different is there's actually meaningful, valuable stuff. Oh, you know what's in common? It's still on Ethereum, and Ethereum bucks. That's what they have in common.
Nice. Cool. And yeah, in your opinion, and what's the single biggest use case for crypto? Obviously you've shared an opinion, it's not currency, right?
No, I think it's programmable money. I can't say one, right? Programmable money, DeFi, yeah, like open finance, and the third web, the idea of replacing, turning computation globally into a commodity that is not controlled by, gatekeepers like AWS, DigitalOcean, Microsoft, etc. Those are the big use cases. Yeah, so that's what I reckon. DeFi, distributed host, decentralized hosting, and whatever the other thing I said was.
Nice. So yeah, complete the sentence. DeFi makes
not a lot of sense right now, but maybe we will in the future.
Yep. We've also had makes some people rich. So
some people rich.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Nice. And lastly, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone new entering into the crypto space?
I mean, the obvious one is read the Bitcoin white paper.
Very good.
The other thing is, I'd probably buy anything. Oh, no, I can't say buy. Don't trade. Yeah, don't trade.
Very cool. All right. Well, it's been a lot of fun talking through with you there, Arthur, and hearing some of that story, and obviously some tidbits there of the exciting stuff that's to come from Dfinity. And obviously, looking forward to hearing what you've got in some of those upcoming podcasts.
Well, you'll be the first to know.
Perfect. We really enjoyed speaking with you. I think you were just awesome and brought on some fresh perspective and all the stories you shared. So thank you.
It's been a real pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Cool. Cheers, Arthur. All right. Shanky. So that was a lot of new content and perspective there to digest.
Yeah, I think so. I think I like the fact that he, Arthur sort of looked at some newer areas from broader sort of impact of computation, developer fungibility, just, reality versus promise. A lot of good points that he made. I quite liked it. I enjoyed sort of listening to his worldview, given also the fact that he's been around for a long time, so he's kind of see it evolve. a fair bit. So yeah, it was fun. It was really good.
Yeah, and I think everyone can associate with some part of that feeling jaded after a while of hearing, so much hype and so many things that just center around the financial side of things. So actually digging into the developer and the protocols and the real innovation that's coming through, yeah, it's exciting. Exactly the sort of stuff that we want to share more with our audience. And yeah, obviously, if you've been tuning in on YouTube or on Periscope on Twitter, do follow us. We're at Going Elliptic, and we've also got a newsletter where we're going to keep publishing out more longer pieces based on the interviews and the content that we're sharing. So yeah, do like, subscribe if you've learned anything today, and drop us a comment if there's anything else you would like to see in a future episode.
Absolutely. Yeah, like, subscribe, and there's plenty of content coming. We also did an interesting session on market analysis in a chartered series yesterday, and I think that may be worth digging in as well. We discussed how ETH, BTC, and some of the other alts were performed. And of course, we brought in our own analysis. It's not investment advice, but you might still find some interesting content there.
Absolutely. All right. Well, yeah, let's wrap it up there for today's Going Elliptic crypto chat with Arthur Falls. And yeah, we hope you'll tune in again next time. All right. Cheers, Shanky.
Cheers, Paul.